I heard my dad tell my brother that I was useless. Mom agreed. So I emptied the account that night. And they had no idea what was about to happen. The house smelled of sage and roasted turkey, the kind of warmth that should have promised comfort. I was moving down the hallway toward the guest room when I noticed the study door left slightly open. My father's voice carried through the crack. Low but firm. Your sister. And she isn't worth a penny. She's done. For a second, I thought I had misheard. Then Nathan's soft reply followed. Uncertain. Almost apologetics. I stood frozen. My pulse hammering in my ears. From my angle, I could just glimpse the curve of my mother's shoulder as she hovered by the window. Richard shuffled papers at his desk. Nathan sat slouched on the sofa. But it was Sylvia who turned her head first. Her eyes met mine across the narrow opening. Instead of shock or shame, she offered the smallest smile. As if she had been waiting for me to hear. The smile hollowed me out more than the words themselves. It told me everything I had feared, but never wanted to believe. That my place in this family had been quietly revised, my value appraised and dismissed. All without my voice in the room. I stepped back into the shadows. Every memory of overlooked trophies and deferred praise colliding into one sharp truth. The house felt colder despite the fire burning in the hearth. Each portrait on the wall, reminding me whose face had always mattered more. By the time I reached the guest room, my hands trembled so violently I could barely close the door. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the bland floral comforter. The sounds of laughter from downstairs drifting upward as if nothing had broken. But something had prayer, and I knew I would not sleep that night. Sleep refused me. And instead, my mind wandered backward through the years, tallying a ledger of childhood moments that now made terrible sense. Nathan was always the one under the lights when he made the debate finals his junior year. My parents flew across the country without hesitation. That same week, I had qualified for the state math championship. I went alone with my teacher. My parents sending me off with a polite smile and a reminder that Nathan needed their support more. You'll be fine, my mother always said. Her tone gentle but dismissive. As if independence had been my natural state, rather than a condition imposed by neglect. I learned early that recognition was a resource allocated sparingly and rarely to me. There was one exception. My grandmother, Helen. She lived in a small craftsman bungalow across town. A house that smelled of lavender and old books. On weekends, she would spread bank statements across her kitchen table and walk me through the mysteries of compound interest and savings bonds. Financial independence is freedom, she said more than once. Her voice steady. Her eyes sharper than anyone gave her credit for. While Nathan complained those visits were boring and often stayed home, I absorbed every word. When she passed away during my senior year, she left me $15. Ling ling ling. Specifically earmarked for education at the reading of the will. I caught the quick glance. My parents exchanged something brittle in their expressions. Later, my mother remarked, almost casually, your grandmother always favored you. Turning what had been a gift into a wedge. That inheritance became my ticket out. Though even then it was reframed as imbalance. Nathan received tuition, housing, and endless allowances. I stretched Helen's gift across scholarships and part-time jobs. Learning to live within margins, so tight, they cut. Lying awake in the guest room now, I realized Helen had done more than give me money. She had handed me tools my parents never intended me to have. The knowledge to stand alone. As I pressed my palms against the quilt, I knew those lessons were about to become my only defense, because the account I had once called family had just declared me insolvent. Northwestern was the first place I felt both invisible and free at the same time. Invisible because no one there cared about the Albright family name. Free, because for once, I could define myself by numbers on a ledger rather than a role assigned at the dinner table. Helen's inheritance covered my first year's tuition and books. After that, I pieced it together. Scholarships. Work study in the library. Tutoring calculus on weekends. I grew accustomed to counting every dollar twice. Not out of fear, but out of pride. Back home, Nathan had chosen USC. My parents paid the bill in full, justifying the expense with words I could still hear. He needs the right environment to succeed. His right environment was an apartment near the beach and a new car in the driveway. Mine was a dorm with peeling paint, shifts at the dining hall, and textbooks bought used and resold for cash. After graduation, I moved east to Chicago, taking a position with a financial consulting firm. My apartment in Lincoln Park was barely 700 square ft. But it was mine. Each piece of furniture I bought secondhand and refinished felt like a declaration. I built my life brick by brick. My emergency fund grew slowly, then steadily. Retirement contributions followed, and eventually a portfolio that outpaced even some of my older colleagues. But discipline did not erase obligation. Every month without fail, I wired $500 back to Portland. It had begun years earlier during what my father called a temporary slowdown in the construction business. I told myself it was my contribution. Proof I still belonged to the family unit. Despite the distance, even after the company recovered, the transfers continued unquestioned. I thought of it as duty then, as though my independence had to be subsidized by a tether. Tonight, sitting in the guest room with my parents' voices still echoing through me, I saw it differently. The money I had sent all those years was more than obligation. It was fuel for a machine that now claimed I was worth nothing at all. Thanksgiving dinner was meant to be a celebration. But in my family, it always felt more like a stage. The table glowed with crystal glasses and silver polished to perfection. Every detail curated by my mother. I had rehearsed how I would tell them how Michael had asked me to marry him. How the ring was exactly what I wanted. Simple and chosen with care. I waited for the right moment. But before I could finish the sentence, Nathan cleared his throat and launched into a description of his latest startup idea. My father leaned forward immediately, eyes alike, peppering him with questions about market growth and venture capital. My mother placed her hand over Nathan's and smiled proudly as though the meal itself had been prepared in honor of his vision. When I tried again, gently mentioning my engagement, the words fell flat. Sylvia glanced at me briefly, her lips curling into that faint smile I had come to know too well. It was the smile that told me she heard me, and also that she had already decided the subject was unworthy of attention. The conversation shifted back to Nathan, and my news vanished like a dropped fork beneath the table. Hours later, while the house settled into its late-night quiet, I walked past the study. The door stood ajar again. Richard's voice was firm, certain. The business, the house, the trust, all of it will go to Nathan. It's already structured. She doesn't need any of it. I held my breath, my heart hammering against the wall of my chest. Through the narrow opening, I saw Nathan nod. Uneasy, but silent. My mother stood at the window, her reflection caught in the glass. She turned. I saw me there, and met my eyes without surprise. Then smiled, the same knowing smile that had silenced me at dinner, before turning back as though my exclusion had always been part of the plan. I slipped back into the hallway, in the echo of her smile burning hotter than my father's words. Already knowing I could not let the night end without opening every ledger they had tried to keep hidden. The house was dark except for the dim light in the guest room where I sat with my laptop balanced on my knees. I should have been sleeping, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw my mother smile. That quiet confirmation of my erasure. Instead of rest, I opened the folders I had carried across the country. Meticulous records I always kept. Bank transfers, account summaries, scanned receipts. At first, I told myself I was only reviewing them to distract my mind. But as the hours passed, the story of my life began to unfold in numbers that spoke louder than any holiday toast. Line after line showed the monthly transfers $500 without fail, stretching back nearly 7 years. $6 000 wired faithfully to a family account I now knew had nothing to do with temporary slowdowns. I scrolled further and froze when I saw another entry. $000 pulled directly from the inheritance Helen had left me. The account had been drained 3 years earlier, disguised as a family investment. I traced it to Nathan's app launch, the one that fizzled before the ink was dry on his glossy business cards. No one had asked me. No one had repaid me. Then came the greater violation. I found loan documents linked to my father's construction company, the guarantor section bearing my name, my credit history, my stability leveraged without my knowledge. I remembered signing a stack of insurance forms one Christmas visit, not realizing what had been slipped inside. The realization chilled me more than the November air seeping through the window. He began typing page after page. I cataloged not just the money but the moments. The championship I attended alone. The scholarships I fought for. The dinners where Nathan's sketches or ideas eclipsed my every accomplishment. 7 pages in total. A record of a lifetime's imbalance. It wasn't for them. It was for me. Proof that I hadn't imagined it. Evidence that could withstand the denials I knew were coming. By the time the first light pressed against the blinds, my hands ached from typing. But my mind was clear. I had tallied the ledger. And the balance was final. The only task left was to place it before them. By the time dawn lifted over the hills, I had already brewed a full pot of coffee. The ritual steadied me. Measured scoops. The hum of the machine. The sharp scent filling the quiet kitchen. I set 4 mugs on the dining table. 1 for each of us. And laid the folders beside them, like place cards at a banquet no one had wanted. Richard was the first to appear. Drawn by the smell. His eyes flicked from the mugs to my face. Then to the neat stack of papers. He knew it was no ordinary breakfast. Without waiting for him to speak, I gestured to his seat. Sit down. There are things we need to discuss. Sylvia entered moments later. It's still immaculate in her morning clothes. A faint trace of perfume trailing her. Nathan stumbled in last. Hair mussed. Rubbing sleep from his eyes. They took their places. Puzzled. But wary. I slid a folder toward each of them. Inside is a complete record of every dollar I've contributed to this family since leaving for Chicago. 10 yuan. 0 inches transfers. 8 yuan. 000. Stolen from the inheritance. Grandma Helen left me, and fraudulent loan documents signed in my name. Read them. Richard flipped a page. His jaw tightening. This is unnecessary, he said. Business is complicated. Families help one another. Help doesn't involve forgery. I answered. My voice steady calm. The tone I used in boardrooms. Sylvia reached for her mug. Fingers trembling slightly. Karen. Darling. You're overreacting. We've always supported you in our way. Think of everything we've done. Your education. Your opportunities. My education was paid for with scholarships and jobs. My opportunities. I cover myself. What you've done is siphoned my resources while telling me I didn't matter. Nathan sat silent. Staring at the papers. Lips parted. But no words coming. I let the weight of the evidence press into the silence. Finally. I pushed my chair back and stood. I'm done. No more transfers. No more guarantees. I will not underwrite this family while being erased from it. The room seemed to contract. The polished table suddenly too small to contain us. Richard's eyes narrowed. Sylvia's face pallid. Nathan's fingers tightened around the folder. I left the words there final. Already preparing for what would come next. Nathan was the first to break the silence. His voice, rough with disbelief. Karen. You've misunderstood. Dad never meant you weren't included. These things are complicated. You're making it sound worse than it is. I met his eyes across the table. Did I misunderstand working nights at the library while you were given a car at 16? Did I misunderstand paying my own way through Northwestern while Mom and Dad covered every dollar of your tuition at USC? Did I misunderstand sending $500 a month from my salary while you lived run-free in an apartment they furnished for you? Color drained from his face. His mouth opened. Then closed again. No words arriving quickly enough to blunt the truth. I leaned forward. The app launch you bragged about. The one that failed within months. Do you know where part of the funding came from? His brows knit. Uncertainty, flickering. Dad said. 8 yuan. Ling ling ling. I cut in from Grandma Helen's inheritance. Money left to me for education. It went into your project without my knowledge, and without a single word of repayment. The paper in his hands trembled as he scanned the lines of my documentation. For the first time, he looked less like the favored son, and more like someone who had been kept in a carefully curated illusion. He turned to our parents, his voice rising. Is this true? You took her money to cover my business? You've been using her transfers all these years. Sylvia started to answer, smoothing her tone into reason, but Richard's sharp glance silenced her. The look only confirmed what Nathan already suspected. His shoulders sagged. Confusion, giving way to something closer to shame. For the first time, I saw the strings that had kept him elevated. And I watched him realize they had been pulled by the same hands that had tied me down. The room felt different then. As if the script had slipped from their control. And Nathan was left staring at the pages, unsure whether to keep reading or to finally set them aside. After the confrontation, the house seemed to close in on me. Every polished surface reflected back a version of myself I no longer recognized. I returned to the guest room and began to pack. The movements were efficient, practiced like preparing for a business trip. Though this time I knew I would not be coming back. On my laptop, I candled every authorization connected to the family accounts. The automatic transfers stopped with a few clicks, and I sent notices to my bank that no future payments should be processed. Next came the harder work. Placing freezes on my credit reports. Locking down the identity my father had used so freely. My firm's legal department responded within the hour to my encrypted message, confirming they would pursue the fraudulent guarantees tied to my name. With each step, the ties loosened, until all that remained were the shadows of them. My suitcase stood ready by the door before dawn. I had already changed my flight to Boston, where a new senior role waited. It was more than a promotion. It was a chance to start over in a city where no one knew me as Richard and Sylvia's daughter, where my work would stand without comparison. Before I left, I reached into my bag for the one item I had carried quietly, all these years. The brass key to Helen's Craftsman house. It no longer opened any lock. But it had always reminded me of safety. I stopped at a small shop near the airport and asked them to engrave a single word across its worn surface. Boundaries. When I boarded the plane, the key rested in my palm, warm from my grip. A final inheritance, not of money, but of meaning. As the wheels lifted from Portland's runway, I understood that my life was no longer collateral for anyone else's debts. Months passed before the first message arrived. Sylvia's email dripped with sentiment, weaving childhood memories into pleas for understanding. She reminded me of holidays past, of meals prepared and sacrifices supposedly made. Though each line carried the unmistakable weight of guilt, I read it twice, then answered with 3 sentences. Acknowledgement of receipt, clarification that I was well, and a reminder that future correspondence should be limited to matters requiring documentation. Richard reached out soon after. Though his tone was strictly professional, he introduced me as a trusted consultant in letters to his business partners. As though attaching my name might salvage the credibility he had lost, I redirected each inquiry to my firm's general line, ensuring he received nothing more than the same automated courtesy extended to any other client. The distance was firm, and I held it. Nathan's call came later. Hesitant at first. He didn't dress his words and excuses. Instead, he admitted what I had long suspected. That he had leaned on their support, without asking where it came from. That he had accepted the advantages as natural. I thought I needed them, he said quietly. But I think I just didn't know how to stand without the scaffolding. His voice carried no demand, only recognition. For the first time, I believed he might learn to carry his own weight. In Boston, I built something Helen would have recognized. I established a scholarship in her name, dedicated to teaching young women in Oregon the very lessons she once laid across her kitchen table. Applications filled my inbox. Students eager to understand budgeting, credit, independence. Each story reminded me that her legacy had never been the money, but the knowledge she gave freely. The past still pressed against me at times, but it no longer dictated my balance sheet. I was investing in futures that saw worth where mine once had been denied, and preparing for the day I would finally hang Helen's key on my own wall. My apartment in Boston overlooked the Charles River, the water shifting gold under the late afternoon sun. On the wall above my desk hung a simple frame, and inside it, the brass key Helen once pressed into my palm. The engraving glinted faintly in the light. Boundaries. It had become more than a relic. It was a compass. A reminder that the locks I chose mattered more than the doors closed to me. When Michael and I married, the ceremony was small, held in a hall lined with windows that opened onto the harbor. Friends stood with us. Colleagues, who knew me not as someone's daughter, but as someone whose work mattered. Nathan came alone. His suit ill-fitting, his expression subdued. He offered a quiet congratulations and no defense of the people who stayed away. That silence was its own kind of reckoning. The absence of Richard and Sylvia did not hollow the day. Instead, it confirmed what I had come to understand. Family is not defined by bloodlines or shared tables, but by those who invest in your worth without demanding repayment. My grandmother had known that truth long before I did. She planted it in me. And I carried it here to this city. To this life I built without their scaffolding. In the evenings, I sometimes sit beneath the frame and let my eyes rest on the key. It no longer opens Helen's craftsman house. But it unlocks something far greater. It speaks of freedom earned. Of dignity reclaimed. Of love chosen rather than owed. And as I look out over the river, I know that the future waiting beyond my door is one I will open on my own terms. Story 2. My jealous sister-in-law tried to poison me at my husband's party right after we announced my pregnancy. But it all went terribly wrong. And now she's facing charges that could land her in jail. Plus she's also getting divorced. I'm 29 and have been married to Harry for 7 years. Whom I adore. Although his sister Keela is always involved and just creates bad vibes. At first, I really liked Keela. But my opinion changed completely over time because she's incredibly negative, manipulative, and toxic. I've always tried to keep the peace with her because I know exactly what she's capable of. It turns out that when my husband was 17, he dated my sister-in-law's best friend. But they broke up because he felt the relationship was more about pressure than pleasure. Then, when he was 23 and single, his sister tried to set him up with another of her friends. And when he didn't want to, they started a huge argument. And she went to her parents to cry, saying she wanted her brother to be with someone she thought was okay with. But the truth was, they didn't listen. When Harry and I met and fell in love, his parents were completely supportive. My sister-in-law, on the other hand, I was always cold toward me. Every time we were around, she would bring up Harry's ex-girlfriends, telling him how well they were doing, or telling him he should talk to them again. I wasn't the only one who saw the oddity. Because Harry noticed it too, and asked her not to mention his exes anymore. When my sister-in-law got angry, she'd make fun of me and call me jealous, saying Harry shouldn't be with someone so insecure. Plus, whenever her parents invited us over for dinner, my sister-in-law would find a way to show up with one of Harry's exes, claiming she'd bumped into her. And out of politeness, she invited her. She doesn't follow me on social media, but she's always the first to see my public Instagram stories. And if any man comments on my photos, she goes and tells her brother, making up stories that I post inappropriate things. Harry and I die laughing at her stories. When we moved in together, she insisted Harry leave me because, according to her, I had so many flaws and she could find someone much better. Honestly, it really hurt because I'd always been nice to her. When we got engaged, my sister-in-law got worse. On the day of the announcement, everyone congratulated us, except for Keela, who suddenly stood up and left the party, leaving everyone with a look of clash. "What's up?" she called Harry, crying and screaming, because she couldn't bear to have found out with the others. According to her, because he's her favorite brother, and she must have been the first to know. Then she sent me an almost threatening text, saying that I better be a good wife because she'd always been the only woman in her brother's life. The message was so out of touch that I felt ashamed for it. I didn't even reply, and just left it on read, which probably pissed her off even more. My sister-in-law started ignoring me, but she still wanted to be involved in every detail of the wedding, from choosing my dress to the bridal shower. And she never missed an opportunity to criticize everything. So much so, that my mother-in-law and fiancé had to stop her several times. But she still didn't change. One day, when we were planning the centerpieces, Kay overheard her and started making fun of her, saying that I was super average and that's why she wanted her brother to be with someone better. That's when I lost my patience and yelled at her that she'd had enough of me with her comments and criticisms, and that I wasn't invited anymore. Kaya froze, unable to believe it. Even my mother-in-law got angry and sided with me. Then, Kaya went to Harry to complain, saying that I'd humiliated her and that he needed to control me because I was going to be his wife. Harry was very clear and told her that he supported me and that if she didn't apologize, she wouldn't be invited either. She reluctantly sent me a heartfelt apology, which I left on red because I didn't want any more drama. In the end, we let her attend the wedding to avoid gossip. Our wedding was in shades of pink and pastel. And everyone, literally everyone, followed the dress code except for my sister-in-law, who arrived in a floor-length black dress and veil, as if she were going to a funeral. We all froze. My sister-in-law was running around saying she was mourning because she'd lost her brother to another woman. At the party, Harry noticed I was uncomfortable and complained. But still, as usual, played the victim, saying I was super controlling and that she could dress however she wanted. In the end, my in-laws kicked her out because she kept causing a scene. It was quite humiliating. And from then on, I completely distanced myself from her. When my son, Nate, was born, I didn't let my sister-in-law near me. She tried to stir up trouble. But both my husband and my in-laws supported me and completely understood my position. 2 years ago, my sister-in-law lost a baby with her then-boyfriend, Yami, and she fell apart. It was sad for everyone. And Harry and I, who already had Nate, tried to be more empathetic and invited her over to the house to spend time with the boy. Although she's always been difficult with me, with my son, she was surprisingly kind. She seemed to change, but it only lasted a moment. Because soon after, she went back to the same old thing. Her life is really difficult. No one understands her. Everyone is to blame for what happens to her. Except her. He never admits his mistakes and is always looking for someone to agree with him, playing the victim in every way. This year he decided to get married and flat out left us out of the invitation. Harry couldn't believe it because things seemed to be going better. When we asked him, he told us he couldn't invite me because he was afraid I'd do something to ruin his wedding. I called her to clear the air and asked her why she thought that when I'd never done anything to her. And she started saying that since she'd deliberately worn black to my wedding, she was now afraid I'd do the same. That's why she preferred to avoid trouble. I was incredibly angry at how manipulative she was being. And I quickly told my husband everything. Harry spoke to his parents. And the three of them decided to make it clear to my sister-in-law that not only were they not going to pay for her wedding, but they weren't going to attend either. Obviously, my sister-in-law burst into tears and began blaming me for the whole mess. My husband told her straight out that she herself had admitted her mistake without any regret. So she had no right to find me an excuse. But Kayla came to her defense, saying our wedding was a long time ago, and she should just get over it. When my in-laws still refused to pay for the wedding, Kayla came to me to apologize and even begged me to forgive her. Honestly, even though it's hard for me to accept, Kayla can be very sweet and knows how to convince someone when she's interested in something. I forgave her and decided to put it all behind me. The wedding with Jay went well, and we all had a good time. But not even 6 months had passed when Kyla came home complaining that her marriage was falling apart. Carrie and I let her stay for a few days, and she spent hours venting and bad-mouthing her husband. It turns out they were having trouble getting pregnant, and Keela was clearly blaming Jamie for everything. I tried to talk to her, but she was adamant that it was all her husband's fault. When she wasn't trash-talking him, she was intruding on our lives and making up completely unrelated things. For example, I usually go to the gym every morning before work. And when I'm running late, I bring my office clothes and shower and change right there. My sister-in-law noticed this and started asking questions. Asking why I showered there. Why I had to go to the gym. Johnny played it off and explained that I liked being in shape and didn't want to arrive at the office all sweaty. She just pursed her lips and nodded. Eventually, things were sorted out with Johnny, and Kayla moved back in with him. One weekend, my husband and I went to dinner with my in-laws. And they also invited my sister-in-law and Jay. We left Nate with a babysitter because he gets bored when the adults start talking and prefers to stay playing. During the meal, my mother-in-law told us that a friend of hers had gotten divorced because her husband cheated on her, and she kept half of his things. Suddenly, my sister-in-law interrupted her and asked my husband if we had signed a prenuptial agreement before we got married. We all fell silent and stared at her. She pretended I wasn't there, and stared at my husband, waiting for an answer. My husband isn't one to mince words, and told her straight away that since we both make good money, we never thought a prenuptial agreement was necessary. My sister-in-law laughed mockingly and began to say that there are many unfaithful people these days and that it could happen to him at any moment. I was deeply annoyed by what she said and asked her to immediately clarify what she was implying. Then my sister-in-law began to say that I was probably seeing someone else because I always carried a change of clothes. And that as Harry's sister, it was her duty to warn him. I was stunned when I heard that. My in-laws later defended us and told her to stop making things up and to stay out of her own way. But my sister-in-law, as if nothing had happened, said she only wanted to take care of her brother and even dared to joke, asking if our son Nate was Harry's because he didn't look much like him. I clearly saw my husband's temper rise. I'd never seen him this angry. He looked at Kayla straight in the eye and told her that was why she wasn't a mother yet. Because she didn't deserve it. And that her son was better off in heaven than with someone like her. Kaya remained silent in shock. My in-laws remained silent as my husband told her everything. That she was a scoundrel. That she was only looking to ruin everything because she had nothing good in her life. And that she was a failure who didn't do anything while her husband worked hard. He told her that, instead of pointing fingers at me and asking about prenuptials, she should take care of her own marriage, because it was obvious she was projecting. Kyla burst into tears and began to sob. She looked at Jamie, who was standing there beside her. But he didn't even notice her. I'd never seen my husband lose his mind like that. Eventually, Kyla got up and ran to the bathroom. My husband was fuming. My mother-in-law tried to calm him down while I held his hand. She told me how sorry she was for what her sister had said about our son. And I just felt for her because I truly understand how frustrating she can be. Honestly, I was glad my husband stood up for me so strongly and so publicly. Because Kayla had already done so much to me over the years. When she calmed down, she apologized to Jamie. But she completely ignored Kyla. After that meal, we cut off all communication with Kayla again. Her attitude wasn't just affecting me. It was affecting my husband as well. We blocked her everywhere, so she couldn't reach us. My in-laws talked to us about the meal and agreed that Kayla had really gone overboard. They realized how their son, who is normally super calm, ended up exploding after Kaya's provocations. It's been a year since we last spoke to her. And we've been really calm. 2 months ago, I found out I was pregnant. It was a complete surprise because we weren't even looking for it. My husband and I feel very blessed with the arrival of a new member of the family. We decided to wait for the special moment to announce it, choosing my husband's birthday. My in-laws wanted a big party. So they set up a party in their yard and invited close family and friends. My sister-in-law must have found out from someone and ended up arriving uninvited close. My husband and I were shocked to see her. My sister-in-law arrived hugging Harry, telling him how much she had missed him, and how sorry she was about their last conversation. My husband took my hand and told his sister that the apology had to be to me, because she was the one who questioned my integrity. My sister-in-law nodded, came over, and apologized. She told me she'd been going to therapy for months, and understood how wrong it was to humiliate me like that. I honestly didn't believe her. But I didn't want to make a scene in front of everyone. So, I just nodded. My in-laws came over and told us they had no idea my sister-in-law was going and that if we weren't comfortable, they would kick her out of the party because it was for my husband. But Harry preferred not to make a fuss. And we decided to leave it at that. Throughout the party, I saw my sister-in-law smiling and mingling with everyone, which seemed quite odd to me. She seemed overly optimistic, which wasn't typical for her. But since she mentioned she was going to therapy, I decided to give her the benefit of the doubt. When it was time to cut the cake, Harry gave such a moving speech that he even said he felt like the luckiest man and most grateful to have another year with me as his wife. His words truly made me blush with happiness. I couldn't help but think how lucky I am that my husband and I are still as in love as we were in the beginning. After all these years. After that, Harry and I decided to tell everyone some incredible news. With a smile, we announced that we were expecting a baby. And after a few seconds of shocked silence, everyone screamed with excitement. My mom started crying and ran to hug me. My in-laws had tears in their eyes as they congratulated Harry and me. Everyone was super happy and immediately started asking us if we had names in mind for the baby. The only one who didn't agree was my sister-in-law, who looked at us in surprise. I thought maybe she needed time to process it. But suddenly her face changed. And she walked away from us with an annoyed expression. I worried about whether I was going to ruin another party. but I got distracted when more people came up to chat with me. When the food was served, I stood up to help my in-laws clear the plates. But Rick and my parents wouldn't let me lift a finger and insisted I stay seated. So I waited for Harry to show me to my plate. Suddenly, my sister-in-law arrived with a huge smile and a plate of food in her hands. She said out loud that she personally wanted to serve me because she was so happy about my pregnancy. She even added that she wanted to make up for all the times she'd been rude to me before. I just nodded and graciously accepted the plate. And then my sister-in-law left. I was about to eat when, luckily, I noticed there were shrimp on my plate. My whole family knows I'm super allergic to shrimp. So I was incredibly surprised when my sister-in-law served me that. I shook my head in disappointment and got up to pour myself something. Just then, Jami came over to congratulate me on the pregnancy. We chatted for a while. And she asked why I wasn't eating. I explained that my sister-in-law had served me shrimp. Probably by mistake. And Jamie, very calmly, told me not to worry. He took the plate and said that he did like shrimp and could have that one. I'd better get another one. I smiled, nodded, and left. Not even 5 minutes later, Jamie started vomiting and writhing in pain. Everyone stopped eating in concern and watched as he tried to get up. Harry and Kiaya ran over to help him. Jamie managed to point at his plate and then his throat. We froze as we realized something was seriously wrong with what he'd eaten. Jamie fainted. And we all screamed in shock. Kaya ran to check the plate and was shocked. She turned to me and asked if I had given my plate to her husband. I felt it. In the midst of the chaos, someone called an ambulance, and he was taken to the hospital. Kaya was crying inconsolably and looked at me very angry. We were later informed that Jamie had been poisoned. I felt like I was going to faint when I heard that. Because I knew perfectly well, unlike the others, that plate was meant for me. Whatever they put on, Jamie could have also killed me and my baby. Harry, my mother-in-law, my father-in-law, and my parents still don't know anything about this. They called the police to collect the food as evidence, since no one understood why he had that plate to leave it like that. As I write this, Jamie is still in the hospital recovering. And Kyla hasn't left his side all night. My husband and I haven't stopped receiving calls from family members asking what happened to Jamie and who could have done something like this. My in-laws are deeply affected by all of this and are now staying at our house because they're afraid to return to their own. No one can believe how everything got so out of hand so quickly when the party was going so well. I'm terrified to tell everyone that the dish was originally meant for me and that it was my sister-in-law who gave it to me. If this turns into an investigation, I'll have to tell the police the truth. I feel so guilty about what happened. But what worries me most now is what my sister-in-law is capable of. Because it's now clear to me that she knows no limits when it comes to hurting me. I don't want to go near her anymore. Nor do I want to let my kids near her. I'll be the bad guy for giving my plate to Jay and putting my brother-in-law at risk. Update 1. Don't make this up. I'm amazed at the amount of comments I've received in such a short time. I never imagined so many people would respond. My hands were shaking as I wrote this. And I haven't been able to sleep. Although many say I'm not to blame. Yes. I feel responsible for what happened to my brother-in-law. I should have thrown away that plate. But I don't know why I let Jamie take it. I haven't stopped crying just thinking about what might happen to him. My husband has already realized something's wrong and won't let go of me. But he thinks I'm just stressed. He doesn't know anything about what I suspect about his sister. I agree with those who say I need to sit down and talk with everyone calmly. I don't know if you'll believe me, but my in-laws have cameras all over the house.